And we have a couple of items on the agenda, the first of which is to approve minutes from the March 15th, 2021 meeting and the April 28th special session meeting that was held last month. Actually, April is 2 months ago. So is there a motion to approve the minutes from our last two meetings?
So moved, Commissioner.
I will second them. Is there any discussion of the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion to approve the minutes of March 15th, 2021 and April 28th, 2021 is approved unanimously. Our next item on the agenda is a very interesting one. It's reviewing a staff recommendation for adopting a new policy related to administration of 118 emergency housing vouchers that HUD has offered to Housing Opportunities Commission. I am expecting that someone from the staff will be walking us through the nature of these new vouchers and what would be required of HOC in order to accept and execute them.
Excellent. Lynn, are you?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, commissioners.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so this is very interesting and somewhat exciting as well. The Biden administration signed the American Rescue Plan into law on March 11th, 2021. This plan appropriates $5 billion for new and renewal emergency housing vouchers, and they really are to facilitate expedited leasing for families at high risk of exposure to the coronavirus disease. As you said, Commissioner Kelleher, HOC was awarded 118 emergency housing vouchers. To qualify to receive one of these vouchers, a family must be eligible in one of four categories, either being homeless, at risk of homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, or being recently homeless and for whom providing rental assistance will prevent the family's homelessness or having a high risk of housing instability. Families who qualify for emergency housing vouchers are not selected from HOC's wait list. Rather, they're referred to us from the continuum of care or the Social Services Department of Health and Social Services Agency. HOC may also accept referrals from victim service providers who work directly with victims of domestic violence. If the COC or the continuum of care or HHS is unable to provide those direct referrals to us. However, in our meetings and discussions with HHS, we've learned that these victim service providers are embedded into the continuum of care. So we anticipate entering into a memorandum of understanding with social services, and that has to be executed by July 31st of this year. In administering these vouchers, they vary.
And can I stop you for a minute?
Sure, certainly.
The county health and human services, state health and human services, or federal health and human services?
It's the county health and human services.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. It might be helpful in this document going forward to clarify that because they all use the same name.
They do, and it was a learning learning role for me to kind of understand the continuum of care and what that actually means. I think Fred is on this call as well, and he was able to provide some insight, and he certainly can jump in. But we did meet with the county Department of Social Services to start the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So this program is administered differently than the traditional voucher program. There are mandatory alternative requirements that we must apply when administering emergency housing vouchers. So I'm going to walk you through what they are. The first is that we have to accept direct referrals from the continuum of care. We must also maintain a separate wait list for these referrals. So at initial leasing or voucher turnover, we would go to this separate wait list. The residency preference is waived. So applicants for this program do not have to live or work in Montgomery County. We are required to provide housing search assistance, which Fred will expound upon, along with the additional services that we are suggesting. Income targeting requirements are not applicable. So generally, all of our voucher applicants are selected at 30% or 50% of the area median income. That is not applicable for this program. The initial voucher term must be for 120 days. Typically, the voucher term is for 90 days that we've elected for our voucher holders.
Wait a minute, can you go back and repeat that for me?
Sure.
My understanding was normally a voucher term is for a year, and you're
Yeah,
saying these
no.
must be for 120 days?
For the voucher term, not the leasing, not where they are actually under lease, but when we issue the voucher to the family to search for a unit, right? So when they're seeking for a regular voucher holder, it's for 90 days. So they have 3 months to go out and look for a place. With these emergency housing vouchers, they have 120 days. We're required to give them.
Okay,
So it's a
that's
search
30
term.
extra days.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Sure. Moving on, the lease term may be less than 12 months. So for a regular voucher holder, we require them to enter into a lease and a HAP contract for a term of at least 12 months for 1 year. With these vouchers, the families may enter into a term for less than 12 months, regardless of, you know, what if that's regular market practice. So if someone is leasing in place, for example, and they're already living in the unit where they want to use their voucher, we may likely enter into an agreement, a contractual HAP agreement or housing assistance payment agreement for less than 12 months.
Okay.
And the last alternative mandatory requirement is that families may port or transfer to another jurisdiction of their choice right away. For typical voucher families, they must demonstrate that they've had legal domicile in Montgomery County for at least 12 months at the time of their application. This is not applicable for these families. Okay.
Okay.
So Lynn, hold on. So
Yes,
Lynn, what
ma'am.
you're saying is that a family can get the voucher, but they don't have to stay in the place that they're staying at for the whole year with the voucher. Because you can, my understanding is you can have the voucher for a year and then you can port someplace else after a year.
Right. So if someone, a regular voucher applicant, if they apply for a voucher and they're selected from the wait list, if they've lived in Montgomery County for at least 12 months, they can port right away. That rule is not applicable for these emergency housing vouchers. They don't have to demonstrate that they've lived in Montgomery County for 12 months. So they can get a voucher and maybe only have lived here 1 month or 2 months and port to the jurisdiction of their choice.
But you also said that these vouchers are also going to people that are not Montgomery County residents.
They don't have to be. That's right. So that's, yeah. That's why this makes more sense. The one thing that I did not mention is as these families are referred to us from the continuum of care, the continuum of care or HHS, they verify that the families meet the 4 eligibility categories. So there's a form that they would send to us certifying that the family is homeless or a victim of domestic violence, et cetera, and complete that verification for us.
That's something I wanted to ask too, the one that you stipulated about domestic violence. Now, if you're under domestic violence, you more or less don't want certain people to know about your business or where you're porting to or where you're living, where you're going to be living at. And wouldn't y'all have to know that once you get the voucher? Once you give them the voucher, I'm talking about the domestic violence ones.
If someone was referred to us under that situation, then yes, we would receive the referral from the continuum of care indicating that they are a victim of domestic violence, but that's pretty much all, we would know. We wouldn't ask, the typical questions that we do as we're interviewing and certifying our families. Does that
Thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the next subject that I wanted to talk about is the limited grounds of denial for emergency housing voucher applicants. So we cannot deny families if they have done one of the following issues that I'm going to raise. And so again, generally, if there are voucher prohibitions that we would apply to a regular housing choice voucher family, they don't apply for these emergency housing vouchers. So if anyone has been evicted or terminated from a federally assisted housing program, we could not deny them participation in this program. If they owed money to a public housing authority in connection with a Section 8 program or public housing program, we could not deny them from the program. If they have not reimbursed the housing authority or owe us money for monies that we have paid for their rent or damages or other amounts to a landlord, we would be prohibited from denying them admission to the program. If they breached an agreement with a housing authority to pay back money that was owed, those are grounds that we could not deny admission. If they were otherwise admitted under the program but had violations for alcohol abuse standards, we could not deny them for that reason. Or if they have engaged in criminal or drug-related activity within a reasonable time before admission. So these are mandatory reasons that for which we cannot deny these families participation in the program. There are mandatory denials. So if we could, I think, Kristen, can you go to the administrative plan where we've marked up the language that shows how we want to administer the program? There are mandatory denials and then there are permissive denials as well. And so if someone has been convicted of producing methamphetamine, that is a mandatory denial where we would not allow them program admission. Or if they are on the sex offender, lifetime sex offender registry, that's another reason where we would not allow them to participate in the program. There are, however, what HUD calls permissive prohibitions. And so we want to adopt some of those permissive prohibitions. If you could keep going to the next page. And so this is just keep going. So these are the ones that I just read. Go to the next one, please. We're almost there. I think you passed it. Go up a little bit. Up a little bit more. Right here. Okay, stop. Thank you. So the first bullet is, again, it's referencing the lifetime sex offender. That's a mandatory prohibition. The next three bullets are permissive reasons why we would not allow them admission into our program. So if they've engaged in violent criminal activity within the last 12 months, if they've committed fraud, bribery, or any other corrupt criminal act in connection with the federal housing program, within the previous 12 months, or if they've engaged in or threatened abusive or violent behavior towards HOC personnel within the previous 12 months, we would deny admission. So these are again, permissive or discretionary reasons that we are recommending to not allow families participation in the program. The next segment of the document is referring to the voucher issuance or the 120 days. Moving along, this section is documenting the services. And so there are certain services that we are required to administer in this program. The housing locator is one of them. And then the other services that we're recommending, we have had a discussion with HHS and resident services to determine what we think the best services meet the needs of our families. So I think Fred is on this call, and I'm going to ask him to talk about the services as his team would be responsible for helping to administer them.
Yes, good afternoon, commissioners. So
Good afternoon.
we will be providing the services to help residents secure housing. So our housing location is one of them. Of course, we'll be helping them identify units, additionally providing transportation assistance, also helping with security deposits, application fees, moving expenses, furniture, and essential household items. So these are all the services that we provide to help them actually secure housing.
Okay.
Okay, great. Those sound very helpful.
Okay. So moving right along, if we continue through the document, portability is the next item or segment of the document, which I've mentioned earlier that we would allow the family to move or transfer right away. And again, this is a mandatory requirement. It's not something that is permissive. I wanted to just talk about, I guess, the other discretionary items that we can include as we're structuring this program. So again, we've talked about the permissive prohibitions. Additionally, we can use some of these vouchers to facilitate emergency transfers for persons who are victims of domestic violence. So we currently have an emergency transfer plan, but we would like to use some of these vouchers as the regulations allow us to for persons who are victims of domestic violence. This is be very helpful for us. So for voucher families, if someone is a victim of domestic violence, the family can move with the voucher. However, this would be beneficial for families who have project-based vouchers or other housing subsidies where if they want to move, a unit might not be readily available within that program. So to have these vouchers available would be instrumental in expediting a move for someone who may be in imminent danger. We can also pre-inspect the units to create a pool of eligible units that an emergency housing voucher family may be interested in leasing. So if we pre-inspect a unit and someone opts to lease that unit, if it was inspected within 45 days of the request, we would go on and permit that move. We may also waive the initial certification, exam, and accept income calculations and verifications from third-party providers or for other subsidized housing programs that the participant may have completed within the last 6 months. And this is only if the family has not had a change of income. We can waive the third-party income verifications and accept self-certification as the highest form of income verification. So it's streamlining our process, our verification process to get these families housed expeditiously, which is really the point. Of these emergency vouchers, Bonnie is going to speak to on the next agenda item, the CARES Act or COVID waivers. And we would like those same waivers to apply to this program. It might have made sense for us to introduce that one first, but she's going to talk about the COVID waivers. One other discretionary policy is that we can accept income verifications that are not within 60 days of our request. So that is, again, something that we do not allow for a regular voucher family. This is instrumental as agencies still are not fully opened. A lot of families who have Social Security benefit statements may be dated from, let's say, November of last year, but they say what the statement indicates what the benefits are for 2021. So in instances of that nature, we would be allowed to accept those verifications. So we are recommending that HOC adopts all of those discretionary policies that I just mentioned. And then there are 3 discretionary options that we are not recommending. And so the first is to establish preferences for these groups of families who are being referred to us. So in coordination with the COC, we could establish preferences. In our discussions with the COC, they felt that it's not necessary to establish preferences as there's already criteria for these families who are being referred to us through the COC. The next policy that we can opt to administer but are not recommending is establishing higher payment standards. We don't feel that's really necessary as we have small area fair market rents and the payment standards we recently adopted through an extensive assessment as to what the right value is. We can, however, through the small area FMRs and this notice for emergency housing vouchers, is extend the voucher payment standard to 120% of the fair market rent if we need to. So we think that's sufficient. And then the last option is to increase the payment standard at an interim exam or rent increase in lieu of adopting it only at the annual recertification. We feel that that annual recertification is sufficient. So those are the major details of the program that we are, again, trying to put together, and we're working with HHS. We have to execute a memorandum of understanding by July 31st. So we are working to draft that document with social services. So it will be available by the end of July, by July 31st. We will work expeditiously to house these families and get our staff trained so they understand the variances in the administration of these vouchers versus a traditional housing voucher. And so we hope that you would endorse our recommendations, and we would like to take this to the commission meeting in July.
That's a lot. Thank you, Lynn.
It's a lot. It is a lot.
And I, when I first saw the announcement from HUD about this, I read through their FAQs and recognized the many ways in which this program is different from what we normally do. So I want to make sure that Commissioner Kroom has plenty of time to ask questions, and then I have several that I will follow up with.
Okay.
But Commissioner Kroom, do you have additional questions you would like to ask at this point?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner, I do. The first thing is, I'm a little confused on it because you say the emergency housing, 118 vouchers for emergency housing.
Yes.
But it seems like the regular vouchers that they get, the regular people that get vouchers, there's a separate, the 118 is separate from the ones that the regular voucher people. Am I correct to say that?
That's right. These are additional new award.
And it seems like some of the things that the regular voucher people are under, it seems like the 118 people aren't.
Yeah.
But you did stipulate some of the things that they can't do, like someone that's what's one of them you said, a sex,
Lifetime sex offender.
yeah, sex offender,
Mhm.
and that's good. So I do understand that. I think you also said that you would deny a person that's under alcoholism or alcoholic. I heard something like that. I wrote
Yep.
that down.
Uh-huh.
You would deny that, okay, and a sex offender, yeah. But then, so what I'm trying to understand, Lynn, is how are you going to check all these things? How are you going to check all these things, but yet most of these things they can go ahead and they can still get this voucher.
Right.
And that's the part I'm a little confused at. I know they homeless people, I understand that part,
Uh-huh.
but I just don't understand how, and it's two things I don't understand is how
Okay.
a person can get a voucher if they're not working, if they're homeless, how are they going to pay the money that you're looking for them to pay? And you said they're homeless.
Mhm.
And where are you getting the information? You saying that social services is the ones that are working with you to refer people to you, correct?
That's right. So I guess in answer to your question, we currently serve other current housing choice voucher customers who are homeless or who were homeless. So that's not new. So if a family has no income and they are a program participant, they have to pay a minimum rent of $50. So I think the beauty of this program is that HHS can work with these families to provide other services that we don't provide, and to help them in ways that we don't. So it's a partnership with social services to provide them with an array of services. But we do have families right now in the regular voucher program who are homeless or who may not have income. And so there's a minimum rent that we require our families to pay, or if they couldn't pay the minimum rent, they can request a waiver of that as well. I think one of the things to recognize is for this program, we received funds. So HUD looked at our program, and I guess we were lucky to receive the vouchers because a lot of other agencies did not. So they did an assessment of the need in Montgomery County, but also the housing authority's ability to administer these vouchers. And so we are compensated with housing assistance payments or funds to accommodate these households, regardless of whether or not they're working or have income.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to get to even hear about 118 emergency housing vouchers. No, I'm not, it's not that. It's just
Yeah.
that I just want the understanding of it because I'm getting a little confused with the regular vouchers versus the 118 emergency.
I think with these vouchers, as I've read the notice, there's a lot more flexibility, for
Yes.
these families. And so HUD has created regulations so we can serve these families as quickly as possible. And in reading the notice, the real underlying reason is that these are vulnerable households that are most at risk of getting the coronavirus. And so a lot of the I guess rationale or reasoning for the regulations is to house this vulnerable population as quickly as possible.
Thanks, man.
Sure.
Are those your questions, Commissioner Crum?
Yeah,
Okay,
she
great.
did.
Thank you. I have a couple, and I was confused between two different places of information in the
Okay.
materials that you sent, the memo and then the projected revisions to our annual plan to address changes because of this program.
Okay.
And I'll start with, on the memo, the second page, where you first have dot points, the 8th dot point down, which reads, HOC must add additional family members to the EHV household composition other than birth or court awarded custody of a child for families under a HAP contract. And then when I go to page 4-10, in the markup of the administrative plan, which is under interim examinations,
Mhm.
it has, when adding a family member after the EHV family has been placed under a housing assistance payment contract, regulations, blah, 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 apply. Other than the birth, adoption, or court awarded custody of a child, the HOC must approve additional family members and may apply its regular screening criteria in doing so. Can you explain what's going on there, what they're trying to do with the new program that's different from what we might have done otherwise? Or were we already doing what they are hoping people will do with this new program, and relative to who counts as being in the family? Because I know with HUD, this is a very complex calculation
Yes, it
Um,
is.
for who actually can live in the subsidized housing and
Sure.
who can't. And I didn't understand if those were saying the same thing or if there was a difference.
They're
So,
saying that the memo and the administrative plan are saying the same thing.
okay,
So after someone is admitted into the program, if they want to change their household composition, they would initiate that by completing an interim exam. So they would submit paperwork to us asking to add an additional person to their household. Under the normal or the typical housing choice voucher, we don't allow additions unless it is by birth, marriage, or court awarded custody. This is saying that we must allow someone, a family member, into the household composition regardless of birth, adoption, or court awarded custody.
I see. So it's basically saying you must do what we were already doing.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. The next question I had to do was on the next page of the memo.
Mhm.
There's a large section in the middle with dot points. And the 7th dot point down, I was not clear what it meant.
So
It has
for
to do
the,
with local preferences and so
Right.
maybe you can clarify
Sure.
for me.
Yep, certainly. So we have preferences for the administration of the regular housing choice voucher program. An example is you must live or work in Montgomery County, right? That preference is not applicable for this program. So what the notice is saying is that we, in collaboration with HHS, can establish preferences for these subpopulations if we choose to. We don't have to create preferences. And so the subpopulations are homeless, at risk of homeless, the domestic, et cetera. In our conversation with HHS, they did not feel the need to create preferences because their criteria in
Prioritizes.
right, and prioritizing these families through their database. And they have what's called the coordinated entry system. They already go through a process to prioritize. So they did not feel that it was necessary. So we are
Okay.
not recommending to create any additional preferences.
Okay. However, this program will essentially eliminate a preference that we have for our regular waiting list of live or work in Montgomery County. And that's
Correct.
by HUD regulations.
That's right.
Okay. All right, great. That is very helpful to understand that better.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have one really global question here.
Okay.
When I first read the announcement from HUD without benefit of your explanations and background and organized delivery of the information, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so complicated. Whoever thought this up did not want the program to succeed. And in part, then when I started realizing how many changes there were to the way we normally work, I was very conflicted because certainly we want to serve best and most expeditiously the most vulnerable people. I mean, the intent of this program is so beautiful
Sure.
that it really begs for adoption.
Hmm.
But when I think back to my business experience of working for health insurance companies that administered a myriad of different employers' health insurance plans, plus Medicaid, plus Medicare,
Right.
I remember going to the CEO at one point and saying, you have got to quit approving exceptions to the benefit plans for a single employer. And he goes, why? It's usually just like 2 or 3 people. And I say, I don't care how many people it is. It means we have to have entirely different processes, entirely different training for people, entirely different reviews to make sure that we're complying, entirely different reporting. And the workload this creates for 2 or 3 people is unmanageable at the rate that you're approving these exceptions. And so I'm very sensitive to what it means to a staff to take on suddenly a small program that, no matter how well intended, becomes literally impossible to administer within the resources that you have available and the time that people can devote to mentally processing all the new rules and regulations, et
Mhm.
cetera. So my global question is, given that this would be, I believe, less than 0.1% of the vouchers that we have,
Mhm.
can we do this with all of these changes? Would we be better to serve the populations that are being targeted here within the vouchers we have than to try to adopt an entirely new program to serve those same people?
No, we would not be.
Okay.
Can we do it? Yes. I mean, we get small batches of vouchers all the time. Is it inconvenient? A little, but it's additional voucher support for customers who, quite frankly, might not get called up given our level of turnover of vouchers. So I think that's the most significant component. And although it's a little more complicated, a lot more complicated than any of us would probably design, it is to meet a specific set of needs that aren't easily met given the 30,000+ folks who are on our wait list against the actual volume of vouchers that we have available for that same group, many of whom would be impacted by COVID in the most adverse way, many of whom would not have access to other resources to augment their life situation, many of whom, quite frankly, having some of the challenges that you and Commissioner Kroom got at with your initial questions. And so this is, while it's not the cleanest way, and it is in large part quite onerous, it does allow an access road that we would not ordinarily have.
Okay. I will accept that as the response that you're making on behalf of the staff who are going to have to do it. And I certainly hope that it proves that way down the road. And I hope that the partners that we'll be working with will work as hard as you all always do, I know, to try to help make all of the rough edges smooth as we go through this. My last question, and this is pure curiosity, given the size of this program, do we think these vouchers are going to last more than 5 days? I mean, I would guess that in 5 days, we can come up with 118 cases in the county that meet
Oh.
these criteria.
I do agree that it'll take a shorter period of time to identify persons who would qualify for these. However, they still got to go through the process. So it'll take us a little bit of time to do it. And I think the root of your question is around, is this resource allocation even sufficient? And so for all listening, the answer is a resounding no. Being poor is expensive. Being poor in a high dollar value jurisdiction like Montgomery County
It's worse.
is worse than expensive, and is quite damning and damaging to individuals and families, persons who are living with disabilities and women-headed households and Black and brown folks who are disconnected largely from the system already.
Okay. The other thing is, I noticed that this is a 2-year program, basically. It has a sunset date of about 2 years from now. What happens to people who have been on these vouchers at the end of those 2 years? Do they have to go back onto our 30,000 person waiting list, or tell me how the closeout process would work for this?
So the sunset date is referring to the cutoff date where we can no longer accept
Issue.
new referrals or issue, but the families who are already in the program will continue in the program as long as they qualify. And so in the memo, I indicated the $5 billion for new and renewal. And I wasn't sure if that was clear, but so that funding is for renewal vouchers as well. So after the sunset date, HUD would continue to fund us for the families who are already housed. It just means we cannot take on any new applicants after that date.
Based on this program.
That's right.
Okay. So this does, in essence, become a permanent addition to our voucher portfolio. It would just go back under if someone rolled off of this, it would go back onto our regular voucher rules.
That's right.
In essence, and our regular funding.
That's correct.
Okay. Those were my questions. That was very, very helpful. I have a much clearer picture and a better sense that this is workable from reading the initial information that came out, which made it sound like a bunch of policy people who had never done this sat in a room and put stickies on the wall and then wrote them all down into a regulation. So I appreciate the fact that you were able to make sense out of it for me and show me how it can fit with what we have and what we do.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I
Oh,
just
you're
have one other question. This is
Sure.
for Fred. I wanted to know how much were the new voucher people would get for moving, in assisting them in moving. How much would they get? I thought I saw 1,000 something, but I don't know.
It's in I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's in the changes to the admin plan, specific dollar amounts, but I can get that to you.
It's $1,800.
18. I knew it was 1,000. Okay, 1,800. Okay.
Yeah, that was just max amounts. It would be based
Right.
on need, but that would be the maximum amount.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
We have a pool of moving contractors that we use when we need to move somebody for our convenience because of renovations, et cetera. Could that also be used if necessary?
Yes, definitely. We definitely plan to use that since we already have that resource in place.
Okay. So that 1,800 allocation would apply based on the pre-negotiated prices we have with our pool of moving people.
Yeah, we do have pre-negotiated prices unless there's something additional for the household, but we do pretty much have those prices based on bedrooms, house size, like 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom.
Right, right. Okay,
Thank you.
great. Well, at this point, then, I am very happy to see all the work that you guys have done to make this workable. I don't believe you need a motion from us. This is just going to go to the full commission. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. We can move on the agenda onto the second item then, which is the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan revisions related to adding waivers for coronavirus. And I know HUD keeps putting more things out there as they learn, as we learn and other housing agencies learn what's really needed. So can someone walk us through these new waiver options and what your recommendations are?
Sure. Bonnie is going to walk you through them.
Thank
Good
you, Bonnie.
afternoon.
Hi.
PIH Notice 2021-14 was published on May 4th of 2021. And primarily it extends the waivers that were previously adopted in PIH Notices 2020-05, 2020-13, and 2020-33 until December 31st of 2021. There were also 3 new waivers that we looked at, 2 of which we would like to adopt. We're waiting for your approval. One is where we are giving applicants the right to self-certify for self-certify income at admission, their social security numbers if they're unable to obtain them, disability status, as well as birth certificates. So they're allowed to self-certify those categories for 90 days, and we'd have to re-verify after 90 days to make sure that the information that they provided us with is accurate. Do you have any questions as it relates to that or the other waivers?
I have one on the last one. It occurred to me both while Lynn was talking and that with this one, what happens if they come back and the documents don't verify or fit within our requirements
Then we have to take steps to terminate them from the program.
to terminate the voucher?
Their assistance, yes.
Mm,
Oh, I see. Okay.
Now, the third
Right.
waiver that we elected not to adopt was the waiver that allows us to, that allows us to, a family to lease a unit that has more bedrooms than the family qualifies for under our occupancy standards. We did not recommend adoption of this waiver because of the impact that it may have on our ability to house large families. And also it could present a financial impact on the program at a later time.
Right. And that, as I understand it, has not been a big problem for us in the past, has it? We have the scattered sites which can accommodate the larger families, and we have the portfolio of multifamily housing for smaller families. So fitting people to the right sizes has not been a huge problem, has it?
No, it has not. And we also have limited housing for larger bedroom size, meaning a 3 or 4 bedroom size. So that's one of the reasons we would not want to not be able to house someone, a large family, because someone else is in a unit that they actually don't qualify for.
Right. Okay. I can understand not wanting to do that for sure, because we have, if anything, the opposite problem of what this waiver is trying to solve. So,
Absolutely. Are there any
Okay.
other questions?
Commissioner Kroom, do you have any questions about these waivers?
no, I read them. No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. My guess is that the COVID waivers after the end of this calendar year may not be renewed the way they have been routinely renewing them at first every 3 months and then every 6 months.
Yes.
I am trusting that you guys are working on a plan for how to undo all of these COVID waivers that we have had. And I would like for you to, the next time this committee meets, brief us on that particular plan. You may have already begun implementing or unwinding at that point, in which case I'd like to know both what the plan is and how the progress to date at that point has gone.
Okay.
So, because I know that these waivers have been very helpful in some regards, and it's great that HUD gave them to us and made the most of them optional so that we could pick and choose the ones that truly would be helpful to us. Figuring out how to unwind them can be as much of a problem as implementing them in the first place. So I'll look forward to some information on that, but I don't have any problem with you taking this to the full commission whatsoever. I think it makes sense what you're recommending.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Anything else that needs to come before the committee today? If not, the meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you, guys. Have a